Hi there, Rabbi. How you doing today?
I'm still looking for the ball I hit into the rough, so I may be on this one hole for a very long time.
Well, speaking of being on one hole for a very long time, I'd like to return to the topic of ability versus permission or license. We've talked many times in the past about whether or not it's okay to do something just because you can do it, as opposed to whether or not you should do it. But do we have to have rules versus our abilities to do things? What, where does the Torah stand on this?
Well, before we get there, I want to just address the anarchists among us who say that if we had no laws, everyone would do the right thing. I offer 10,000 years of human history, and that's never happened. So, this idea that we can live in a large group, maybe small groups can, but in large groups as countries, it's never worked and never will work. So, we need to have some agreement of how do we behave as human beings. We often talk about 10 commandments. Well, these are really the 10 utterances. They're 10 of the 613 commandments in the Torah. Whether one follows all of them, any of them, some of them, is not my point today. Rather, they are there, and some of them cannot be done until the Messiah comes. Some cannot be done until we reinstitute sacrifice. So a lot of them just won't apply, don't apply, but some do. The goal of the commandments was for us to be able to live together as human beings. So in the Talmud, the rabbis look at the commandments and they decided that to protect us as people from violating a commandment, we're going to create a rule that keeps us away from actually having to violate or being tempted to or inadvertently violate. So they built a fence around the commandment. Well, the next group of rabbis, not to be outdone, built a fence around the fence. They didn't look at the original commandment and say, gee, my colleagues developed some rules that aren't working. Let's get rid of them and create new ones. No. They kept them and built another fence. Well, as the centuries evolved, there are so many fences that sometimes it's hard to know what the rabbis were trying to keep us from doing. And so we tear down every fence in the Reform movement and go back to the actual words. Now, this brings up the question of license and doing. Just because I can go 50 miles an hour on a particular street doesn't mean I should. So we put up a sign. The problem is me. I don't say the sign says it's not safe to go faster than 30. I don't say that. I say I can do it, so I will. So we're right back to social responsibility, Joe, and helping each other.
Well, what about the other side of the argument? There, for example, we live in a country right now, for whatever reason, is now almost evenly divided about two completely different trains of thought in terms of human rights. We have laws that allow us to decide this, but the second one side points to the law and says, see, this gives us the right to do that. The other side says, yeah, but it's not right. You're taking advantage of the law. How do we reconcile those differences?
I think the piece that's missing is the sense of us or we, that we're in this together. And how do we solve the problem rather than my way or the highway? We've come into an area where selfishness seems to reside. We can't seem to live in the gray. We want to look at each other and say, instead of going to extremes, let's agree we're going to be in the gray area. Now, how do we do this? How do we support each other? How do we keep each other safe? And it's not about doing it my way. We have to stop that nonsense and look at the problem. How do we protect pedestrians? How do we design roads, sidewalks, traffic signals? What about bicycles? And what about training individuals so they stop walking in between? A lot of cities have put up fences so you can't jaywalk. Why are they doing that? Because we're not responsible enough to go to the intersection. So we're building a fence so you can't. So what do people do? Jump over the fence. That therein lies the problem, Joe. We have to agree that we're looking for solving the problem, not my way or your way, but a way that does the most for the most number of people.
Well, you're headed my way, Rabbi, on this. I agree 100%. Thank you all, as always, for your wisdom and support. And let's go look for your ball now because I think the foursome behind us is getting it antsy.
Just because I can spend all day looking doesn't mean I should. I don't want to hold up the game.